So, raise your hand if anyone in here has an iPhone, Apple, iPhone, iPad, Apple. Raise your hand. Cool, so do I. In this speech, I'll be talking about Apple. The three things I'm going to be hitting on today is how did Apple get started? What are the peaks and the valleys and the struggles the company went through, and how did it get out, and why it's effective? From the article, Apple Computers History by local.gov by the authors Angela Richardson and Ellen Terrell. They basically talked about how back in 1976, two college dropouts, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, two college dropouts, 1976. Like, you know what? They both had a vision of starting computers. So what they did was they went into one of their garages, started a thing called Apple, and they started making Apple computers, these two college dropouts. So then at the time, this is 1976, so the way they were making these computers was really bad. No keyboards, no proper casing, but they were effective because in 1976, computers didn't exist at the time. So what was cool to them, what is lame to us, what was cool for them, what they were making, blew people away. So people were buying it. They were making money, making profits. So this went on from 1976, but then when 1978 rolled around, they had a profit of $117 million worth of profit. So from there they started growing and getting bigger. So when they made that profit in 1978, when 1980 rolled around, from there just kept getting bigger and bigger, and all throughout the 80s, it was like Apple just kept getting bigger and expanding and getting bigger, and it just kept growing from that point away from the garage. So now that I've shared with you how it all got started, let's dive into what were some of the peaks and valleys. So you're probably thinking, like, success going forward, done with my speech, right? I should be done, but I'm not done. So everyone has peaks and valleys. So like I said, there was a complete up in the 80s, but when the 90s rolled around, there was a complete down. Steve Jobs had failures. So, and it even says it also said in the same article with Ellen Terrell and Angela Richardson, they basically talked about how basically throughout the 90s, the popularity of Apple started going downhill. People were even like, oh, they're going down. So by 1996, people were even saying, Apple is gone. They're not going to make it. They're done. So Steve Jobs knew about this. So then he took the company into both hands because the other Steve left in 1987. So Steve Jobs was left to do this by himself. So he's like, what am I going to do? I'm going to turn things around. So then what he did was he took the board members of Apple. He's like, let's do something, guys. And Steve knew some guys over at Microsoft, so like friends. So then with the help of Microsoft and the help of the board members of Apple, and with Steve Jobs' mind, they were all able to come together, put ideas together, form things to make Apple better and to turn things around. So from 1996, what everyone thought was the period Apple was going to die, it was the turning point. So, but there's more. That's peaks and valleys number one. Peaks and valleys number two is this. Steve Jobs had failures. He's not always the successful man you think you see on the outside. He's had failures. So in the article that stated the 5 of Steve Jobs' biggest mistakes by Peter Sims, the 3 failures that I found were he created the Macintosh TV, the Apple III, and the Apple Lisa. These are the 3 things that were the biggest fails for him, and he was hit by it. Criticism, this is terrible. But he was able to learn from his failures and come up with something better called the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. But it was from those failures he was able to get it. So that's peaks and valleys number 2. Peaks and valleys number 3 is peaks and valleys number 3. I would have to. Oh yes. So in 2015, when the Apple Watch came into the picture and it was pretty much brand new, Apple was hit with pretty much criticism. What the heck is this? Nobody's ever seen Apple go into creating something like this. People thought this is not going to work. No one's going to buy it because it's like when you see something new, what do? Oh, what the heck is that? Joke, not going to work, not fashionable. But Apple stuck by their guns regardless of the backlash. And in 2015, by the end of the year, it was noted as really successful. So now that I've shared with you why the peaks and valleys. Let's dive into why it's effective. In the article, Apple, the Good and the Bad by Phil Coburn, he basically talks about Apple got rid of the floppy disk in the 90s. And then from there, it was like they're basically the leaders in the industry by creating new technologies that work for people. And then if you take Apple out of the picture, it's kind of like they're the reason we have iPads, they're the reason we have iPhones. Those are brutal and those are crucial to our world and our society. So you take the leader out, what do? You're lost. Where do we go, people? I'm lost. I don't know what I'm doing. Right? And the other thing that Coburn mentioned in the article was it allows you to it's as effective and is as sharp as people say Google Pixel's better, Samsung's better, but Apple is up there as one of the sharpest phones to use, Coburn stated. So now that I shared with you the peaks and valleys, I shared with you how it was created, I shared with you why it's effective. So after my speech today, if you're ever like, I'm not going to use Apple, I need a new phone, my phone is cracked, you can take my speech and you can be like, you know what, now I'm going to start getting Apple now because of Josh's speech. Thank you.